Okay. Welcome everybody to the Workplace Rapid Screening Program, Reopening Safely, learning from the experts on how to set up a rapid screening system in your workplace. This is being hosted by the Rotman School of Management and the Creative Destruction Lab. My name is Sonia Sennik. I'm the Executive Director at Creative Destruction Lab and the CDL Rapid Screening Consortium. Throughout our 60 minutes together today, we have slido.com. If you'd like to go there and put in the code CDL at the top of the website, you can put in questions, and we will be answering the questions throughout the event. Now, although we are meeting virtually today, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many people and Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Okay, great. So we're going to get started. I'm thrilled to be joining you today with a few of our teammates from the CDL Rapid Screening Consortium. Very warm welcome. I'll introduce you to them as we go through, but very warm welcome to Janice, Laura from the University of Toronto, Karina from Rogers, Anjie from DECIEM, Brigitte from Air Canada, and Emma from CBC. Now, before we get to our speakers, I want to provide everyone with an overview of the CDL Rapid Screening Consortium. Sort of the whole program started with this idea of the pandemic information gap. So what does that mean? You know, what it means is for the 1 in 5,000 people who get COVID-19, it's a very serious health problem. But for the other 4,999 that don't get COVID, it's an information problem. So I don't know if you have it, you don't know if I have it, we lock each other down, you know, as if we all do. It's a very blunt instrument to solve what we are referring to as an information gap. So CDL Rapid Screening Consortium was designed to address this pandemic information gap. So I'm going to walk you through in just a few slides here how we did that. So first, in August of 2020, we assembled 12 of Canada's leading organizations with a single mission, to develop a cost-effective system for reopening the economy during the COVID-19 pandemic. We spun out a new nonprofit organization called the CDL Rapid Screening Consortium, fully focused on designing a cost-effective workplace rapid screening system. It's hard to believe this started almost a year ago. We are now in our implementation phase across the country. So what does that look like? It looks like this. We currently have 195 sites operational across 8 provinces. We have 102 sites planned to start in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So by the end of July, we'll be up around 300 sites or so. This is a snapshot of our current cohort, current participating companies. We currently have over 340 organizations registered for the program, including nonprofits, airlines, telecommunication companies, media companies, beauty companies, co-ops, food centers, et cetera. I wanted to say, before we go into more detail, registration is open. So there's a bit of a call to action for this event. If you are part of a business or own a business, are part of one that would be a good fit for the program, it's offered free of charge to any Canadian organization. It's designed to be sector agnostic and easily translates to organizations of all sizes. We have organizations that are 3 people to 30,000 people. The features are, a number of items: onboarding support, kickoff meetings, scaling your knowledge through the buddy system, our virtual help desk, our Slack channels, and our playbook and resources. We also have our technical support for data screening intake, which I'll take you through. Again, program is free of charge, and currently rapid antigen screens are provided free of charge through Health Canada or provincial health agency programs. The link is here. We'll also place it in the chat for everybody that would like to see it. Okay, so that is what you can see on our website. So what is the program itself? This is a monopoly board of what the program looks like. It walks you through all the steps for the employer to set it up. And then it walks you through the steps of what an asymptomatic worker would go through. So again, this is a program for people who feel fine. They feel fine to go into work. They are asymptomatic. And the purpose of the program is to screen them 2 times a week to make sure that they are not infectious with COVID and not bringing COVID potentially into the workplace. We have a quick start guide for small businesses. I won't take you through the details, but it really just steps through the 6 key steps here of setting it up in your workplace. It's a 2-pager with some hyperlinks out to some photos and it links into all of our G Drive resources, which we make available to any of our participating companies. You also design it to fit what you feel comfortable with as an organization. So on the left-hand side here, you can have a healthcare practitioner or trained professional administer the swab. In the center, you can have self-administration, so a trained person watching you swab yourself. And then on the right-hand side, at-home screening. There's some at-home screening pilots being permitted in 5 provinces currently. And of course, any of these 3, depending on what province you're in, you'll have certain guidelines on what you need to follow. And that's another feature of what we do, and we capture in our playbook of what is the latest guidance in each of the regions across the country, which has been a pretty dynamic landscape over the past several months. It's in English. It is also en français. This is an example of an article. Really, I'll take you through just these snapshots to show you this is really the result of work across a number of different organizations in a very diverse set of workplaces, from airlines to Scotiabank Arena to Shoppers Drug Mart employees to the oil and gas refineries in Northern Alberta, shopping centers in the Greater Toronto area. A number of different organizations and different implementation styles have really resulted in that playbook you see there. This is just a snapshot to show you that people are working with what they have. It's not a system that sort of adds a whole building onto your existing operations. We have some guidelines on how to make it as smooth and efficient as possible in the workplaces that you have. And we share a lot of that, very generously. It's a culture of sharing and supporting each other through learning this and innovating together. And so these are just a handful of examples of organizations sharing their materials and resources with other organizations across the country. So one key thing here is a key part of the rapid screening system is the data transfer. So capturing the data and reporting it back to the province or Health Canada for the screen usage. We found that was going to be a big hurdle for our consortium members. So what we did is we built a data system that worked across the entire country. So any province, any territory. We have 3 different ways that you can upload to it. An Excel portal and 2 different versions of an app offered free of charge. This is the employee view for our enterprise app. There's also an at-home screening module that we built in partnership with Microsoft and Air Canada. And then there's also our CDL RSC standard app that we built in partnership with Thrive Health. And they also have an at-home screening module and workflow if that's something that your business would be interested in. And all of that, the advantage of the consortium is we consolidate all this data together and learn together. So we de-identify the data. So we never have any personalized data coming into the central dashboard, but we have de-identified data where we can learn across the trends across the country in different organizations. So this gives us a really good sense of, how are these rapid antigen screens performing in the field, in the real world, being implemented in real workplaces. Okay, I'm just going to pause there and hand it over to Janice Stein. Janice is Professor Janice Stein is the founding director of UT's Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, and she is a key member of our CDL RSC steering committee. Janice, over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Sonia, for that. And I just want to take a step back for all the companies that are in the room with us and just say that something really unique in the history of the private sector in this country has happened here over the last year. And I'm going to take a minute each to tell you about the 5, and we can talk more when we get to the Q&A section. And I think everybody in this room and all our partners have an enormous amount, frankly, to be proud of. The first point I want to make, these companies, as Sonia just got, came together not only to fund, and they were the lead funders that got us out of that critical experimental phase, not only to fund, but they did something that is unique. They came together to engage in shared organizational activity together. That's a departure from what we normally do in this country. Secondly, and this, I think, was part of the secret sauce that has gotten us to where we are now over this last year. Members of each company committed some of their very best people, and you're going to meet them. You're going to meet 3 of them when we get to them, but absolute superstars from their businesses to work with us in this early phase. And they worked in integrated teams to scope out this project. So instead of handing one task to one company, another task to a third or a second, we actually built integrated teams. And wow, the magic that happened in this room as people got to know each other and got excited about the shared project. You know, in technical language, we might talk about this as network effects, but really what was happening is for the first time, some of our largest companies got to know each other horizontally across, and all kinds of extraordinary things really happened. The third Sonia's talked about, which is knowledge sharing. Because we had weekly meetings, and after we went live and operational, we continue to have that, companies were sharing in real time what they were learning in the field. So if we think about this as a story of innovation, and as we grow our core cohorts, as knowledge sharing continues today, companies are learning and making changes to what they're doing in real time. And that is probably a story of some of the fastest learning across a large number of private sector companies that we can imagine. The fourth innovation here, Sonia and I and the team met with the provinces every single week. This was what we call our Fun Fridays as we travel across the country on Zoom to meet with the provinces. And again, something extraordinary happened here. For those of you who know this country, our provinces don't talk to each other all that much. So provinces got into a healthy competition. We're learning about what another province was doing in real time, up their game. And literally, as we traveled east to west across the country, by the time we finished, something new was happening. And they, and this is my final point, they were learning from companies' experiences. So actually we had, and which is why I'm so excited about this project, a virtual and a virtuous cycle going here. Companies were sending us the identified data. Provinces who didn't have access to that quality data were saying, what are you hearing? And we'd say, well, we're hearing this. This is working, this is not. Oh, really? Well, bring that on board because we're going to adjust our guidance. The next stop, what are you hearing? We're hearing this, and one of the provinces is going to adjust their guidance. And as Laura will tell you, this is driving policy learning and change in real time. I think this is an exceptional moment in the history of the private sector of this country. We will talk about the health benefits and the contribution to cases saved, but there is an absolutely astonishing sector and story that we have to tell in this country about ourselves. Over to you, Laura.
Great. Thank you so much, Janice. I'm Laura Rosella. I'm an associate professor of epidemiology at the School of Public Health. And my role here is really to ensure that whatever's being rolled out here aligns and respects the provincial public health guidance and fits in and enhances. And I think, as Janice mentioned, the companies have been doing an exceptional job at making sure their employees are safe and that we're implementing this in a safe way. So next slide. So I'm going to just spend just a couple minutes giving you a little bit of the background from the public health point of view. And the first one is, why would someone implement a rapid workplace screening system? And notice the words here, very important, screening and system. Next slide. So the first reason, and one of the reasons that I certainly became passionate about being involved, is that we know that people in workplaces are at highest risk for COVID. Not everybody has the ability to be able to work from home, and we know that those individuals are disproportionately affected. And so this became a great opportunity to actually offer a solution to help those workplaces and those working through COVID-19. Next slide. So the rapid screening system, and when we say screen, there's multiple steps, and we can get into this a bit later, but it's rapid, so you get the results right away, and then offer confirmatory PCR testing if you screen positive. But it's a system because it has to be done in a particular way. It's not just test when you feel like it, it's testing as many people as possible, at least 2 times a week. That's a system, when implemented that way, that actually keeps transmission down in the entire workplace. Next slide. And I'll talk a bit about how that is. So one thing really important to keep in mind is this is about having an extra layer of protection in your workplace. So it does not replace the existing measures, masking, distancing, improved ventilation that employers were already doing. This is about layering on top of that. So next slide, Sonia, if you can just go through. Click one more ahead. Perfect. So they're symptom checking. These are individuals that feel well. It's not that they're coming to work symptomatic and you're using this test to rule them out. That would be an inappropriate use of a screen. They come, they're well, they're hand washing, they're masking, they're distancing, all the other measures that are in place. And on top of that, there's this extra layer. And the reason why this is important, many of you will be familiar with the Swiss cheese model that's been talked a lot about during COVID. The idea that none of these are perfect. We know that. We know that symptom checking is not perfect. We know that there's challenges with all of them. But even if they all have holes, if you line up all the layers, we should be able to provide a safer environment. And so that's the concept here. Next slide. So very briefly, the schematic just illustrates what the principles are here. So if an individual feels fine and they've done their symptom screen and they go into work, but they are indeed infectious but don't know it, so this is someone that probably they're asymptomatic because they will develop symptoms later. A small proportion never develops symptoms, but that's less common. And they'll go into the workplace and potentially, if things break down, they could spread it in their workplace, and then you have outbreaks. And then those individuals bring it home, and therein lies a very common story we've seen throughout the past 16 months or so. So the idea here is that they screen either right before they enter the workplace. They get that information right away. If they screen positive, they immediately go for PCR testing. They isolate, and then that individual will not have the opportunity to enter the workplace to begin with. Next slide. Really important, just briefly talking about the difference between tests and screens and PCR and antigen. It can get really confusing, and I'll say that in the media it's reported sometimes in a confusing way. These are antigen screens, meaning they detect proteins on the surface of the virus. So they're really good at detecting when someone is actually infectious at that time. They're infected, the virus is there, and you're looking at the surface protein. And this is distinct from PCR or molecular tests, which detect the genetic material of the virus. Next slide. And obviously, by doing this, they can detect very small amounts. There's an amplification process, so they're very, very, very sensitive. And so that's one of the trade-offs. It's a less sensitive test, but you get the results rapidly and you're more likely to detect when infectious, versus a PCR test, which is used for diagnostic purposes. It's the difference between a screen and a diagnostic. The other point, next slide, I just want to mention is that there's lots of reasons why you would use one or the other. So instead of thinking about it as one test is better than other always, think about the use case. So obviously for diagnostic purposes, molecular tests are preferred, and that's what's used in the clinical setting for diagnostic reasons. For this context where you need the result quickly and it's used as a screen, it's also significantly less expensive. It's really hard to scale at large levels PCR technology, although of course it's getting better all the time. So these are some of the reasons why an antigen test is appropriate for this context. Okay, next slide. So the other piece, when I said system, we have a KPI, and our KPI is the number of people regularly screened. This is not about just, as I mentioned before, screening when you feel like it went off. We're really interested in keeping the workplace safer. And if it's safer, you can't just screen when you feel like it. You want it to be part of a system. It's happening regularly. Imagine going through a medical detector at the airport. You can't just do it sometimes and not others. You want to make sure that it's happening on a regular basis. So that's the concept. The other reason is because you can be infectious for a couple days before symptom onset. We know that screening at least 2 times a week will ensure protection during the infectious stage, which is a shorter period of time compared to, say, a PCR test. We know from several modeling studies now and more evidence emerging all the time that controlled transmission, it's better actually to screen more frequently. The challenge with testing at one point in time, even with a very specific test, is it's just one point in time. If you have this system in place where you're screening more frequently, that actually can have a big difference in terms of controlling transmission. Next slide. And so the last slide to sort of illustrate this is, we've detected a number of positive cases through our system, 228 confirmed, but there's actually many more that are pending their PCR confirmation that we call presumptive positives. So what's been the impact of that? Well, we know, next slide, from the modeling studies that you can have up to an 80% reduction in the reproductive number if it's regular screening. So that really key point, that it's not just ad hoc screening, it's screening at regularity among as many people as possible in the workplaces. And we call these, saves. These were at least 228 and numbers increasing all the time. People that did not go into the workplace. They were detected at the door. They felt fine. They were asymptomatic. They did not intentionally go to work ill, and they were caught, isolated, confirmed PCR positive. They screened positive, confirmed PCR positive. And over time, given what we know about the reproduction number, that could have had a significant impact in transmission, within 20 days. Another way to look at it is if you had that number, you get that under control within 5 or 10 days by regular screening. So just a simple illustration of the impact of identifying these individuals at the door, if you will, and preventing them from getting in the workplace to begin with. All right, I'll end it there.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. Sorry for the issues with the slides there. So in practice, lessons learned. So for this section, I'm so pleased to welcome Karina Dearborn. She's the Director of Workplace Experience at Rogers Communications. Anjie Davis, the Head of Environment, Health and Safety at DECIEM. Brigitte Saint-Pierre, who's the Director of Technology Strategic Initiatives at Air Canada. And Bédard, the Director of Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery at CBC Radio Canada. So I'm going to start with Brigitte. Brigitte, when you set up your rapid screening system, Air Canada started setting them up in January of this year. Your employees embraced it more than you thought they would. Why is that? And how do you know that they like the screening system?
So from the start, we ran surveys to as much get a feel from employees if there were any friction points that we could work through, but also to understand if they, they enjoyed the process, how did they feel, what did it bring to them? And overwhelmingly, the feedback was positive. They felt good, that Air Canada was keeping them safe, that they didn't have to feel worry and anxiety that they were bringing COVID home and they didn't know it. We had a lot of great comments from employees that were proud of Air Canada, and that just helped us to give us wings to really just scale and to work longer hours to make this happen for all of our employees.
Awesome. And Emma, I'll ask you a similar question. I know CBC has been doing this for a few weeks now, and in a variety of your different settings for supporting your shows and your productions. How has the response been from your employee groups?
So our first pilot, we haven't been in this as long as some of my other colleagues here, but the first pilot that we did was composed in large part by a group of individuals who hadn't been in the workplace. They needed to come back for a specific production. And what we heard from them is that offering rapid screening really helped sort of address the anxiety of coming back into the workplace after being home for so long. And this was also happening at a time that the daily case count in Toronto was particularly high. So it was reassuring for them. A small group, about 90% participation rate, which was really, for our first go at this. How do we know we liked it? Mostly they told us. We also made a asking for feedback and helping drive the understanding that they were shaping their program or the future versions of this pilot through their feedback. But also they kept coming back, which was a good metric for us in running a voluntary pilot. Having them come back meant that we were doing something right. And now that we've launched a second pilot for the Olympics, we're offering home screening. We're also seeing a higher participation rate amongst individuals who experienced the first pilot. So hopefully we got something right. And really, we're sort of doing the same and always asking ourselves, how can we make this as simple as possible for people to join? And so far, a good response. The other thing not to discount is the word of mouth. People joining after hearing from their colleagues that it was not a negative experience, and in fact, quite the opposite.
Awesome. Karina, I'm going to go to you next. How does the rapid screening system allow you to open and operate parts of your businesses that otherwise would be difficult to operate?
Sure. Thanks, Sonia. I just want to say it's just been a privilege and an honor to be part of this and to work with everybody on this call and so many more. We definitely could not have done it without it, just to start something on your own out of thin air. So being a part of this consortium is been very helpful. So thank you. How has it allowed us to operate? In many ways. So we have two sort of high-risk environments in our organization. We have distribution centers, which allow us to fulfill customer orders, and our media sites, such as Sportsnet, running the playoffs, as well as something like 680 News. And we need to keep those operational all the time, no matter what. And so having rapid screening at the door has helped us actually identify positive cases from entering our workplaces, which has enabled us to mitigate against workplace outbreaks, which would have forced us to close down those locations and prevent us from meeting our customers' needs or, showing the news, for example. And it's also helped us keep all of our essential workers in those locations safe. They have not been able to do their jobs at home. So it's helped us with employee safety and also keeping our business critical operations open throughout this entire pandemic.
Awesome. And Anjie, from DECIEM, I'm going to ask you something similar. So how has it been for DECIEM operating your business, your manufacturing facilities?
Yeah, so it's really impacted our manufacturing and our warehousing facilities. Being in the west end of the GTA, we had a lot of employees that worked in the hotspots, and they were bringing COVID into the workplace. And obviously we learned as we went, and we added layers and layers and layers of protection. We did PCR events, and we were still having cases. We were still having outbreaks. So by implementing the rapid screening, and we joined, I think we were cohort 4. So we were a little later down the road, but it really helped us to get control, to feel like we had control over what was happening in the workplace, and not just that we were, at the mercy of people's symptom screening, were they being honest, and all of that kind of stuff that we relied on in order to stay open. And we've continued to operate throughout the entire pandemic. So putting this in place really helped us to continue to operate.
Awesome. And so speaking of operations, Laura, I'll actually first go to you about going into the fall. If there is a resurgence, sort of what does this mean for businesses? And the use of a rapid screening system in the workplaces?
Yeah, great question. So, the difference is, if you think about that layered graph that we show, we now have a new tool or a new layer there, a very important one, vaccination. So what we're talking about now is a combination of vaccination and screening to ensure safety. So definitely, there are some uncertainties that we have to just be realistic about. We have the variants, which we're all hearing so much about on the news. We have a fall reopening. We have borders reopening in the context of a lot of countries not having enough vaccine. So there will be circulating COVID. We have schools opening with kids not being vaccinated. So there's still a lot of uncertainties. And even if there's small pockets of the population not vaccinated, the virus will find them. And there could still be, for example, workplace outbreaks despite that. So it'll be the combination of the two, and definitely a useful tool managing the uncertainty, particularly in the context of variants and some unknowns over the next couple of months.
We'll go to 2 questions from Slido. So one, Jennifer, you wanted an info package. It's on the website, and every day there's a 20-minute webinar if you'd like, if that's helpful. 2 is a question about how unions have reacted within the workplaces. So Brigitte, I'll go to you on that, and then Karina. It's Brigitte from Air Canada, then Karina from Rogers.
So our unions were very positive. We involved them from the very beginning, and safety is a core value for Air Canada, and this was about keeping our employees safe. So really positive involvement from the unions and from our employees who were unionized.
Karina?
Similar to Air Canada, we involve them from the beginning. The unions are always very supportive of anything we can do to keep our employees and their employees safe. So for the most part, it's been very positive. We do have at least one grievance, and that was when we made in some of our high-risk locations testing as a requirement for entry. And that's when we had to do a little bit more discussions in terms of why we're doing this and what those requirements were, et cetera, to work with them on that. But overall, again, extremely positive and very grateful for what we've done to keep them safe.
That's great. There was actually another question on Slido about, is participating in testing mandatory, i.e. you can't work if you don't test? Emma, I'm going to ask how you're approaching your pilots at CBC, and then Anjie.
Sure. Our program right now is entirely voluntary, recommended, but voluntary.
Anjie?
Similar, we didn't make it mandatory, but it was strongly recommended. And we had really good uptake from employees, just given the number of outbreaks and events we've had. So they were very much on board with it.
And then Laura, I'll go to you with this question. People are curious, until what percentage vaccination will rapid screening in businesses be necessary? So screening is required now, you mentioned in your slides there, but when would we think of even stopping it?
Right. So the first point is this is not forever. I think that's important to emphasize. At what percentage of vaccinations? A little bit of a tricky question and a moving target. And part of that's because of the variant. So this comes from modeling studies. We don't actually know, but we expect that herd immunity to be achieved. Originally, we had thought around 5% vaccine coverage of the population. But the Delta variant, for example, that's going to be dominant shortly in Canada, is dominant in other parts of the world, is much more transmissible. So the herd immunity needed when you are 50 to 60% more transmissible might be closer to 90%. And so I think we still have a ways to go until we're at that point. The other thing I'll say is that's just for the population. There might be reasons why workplaces still might want to continue screening for a little while longer. Maybe they don't have as high a vaccine uptake for lots of reasons. And so it is a bit of an individual workplace decision as well.
Great. Laura, I'm going to just dig into two more things with you. One is about relying on rapid antigen screens for the different variants. And, can you speak to that, to the community? Absolutely.
So any tests, and this goes for PCR diagnostic tests as well as antigen tests, they're approved by regulators like Health Canada and FDA, and there's a constant evaluation to make sure that they're still working and doing what they were intended to do. Antigen tests work on the surface protein. And the good thing about antigen tests is they detect what we call the N protein. Most of the mutations that we see are on the spike protein or the S protein. And so for the most part, many of the antigen tests are unaffected. There's some fringe cases where that's not the case, but not the ones we use in Canada or that are approved by Health Canada. PCR tests, and some of the one that's been in the news is the rapid variant test, which is not an antigen test. It's a molecular multiplex assay to detect variants. And that one has been affected by some of the variants because it's detecting a specific part of the genetic material of the virus that has changed because of the variant. So some of that caused some confusion in terms of reporting, but they're talking about a multiplex PCR test that was affected.
Actually, just on that, Janice, there's different types of tests out there. Can you just speak to the community about the way in which the screens are approved and the Health Canada approval process? There's a question in the chat about disposable point of care PCR tests that's being used in LA. Can you speak about that?
So I think Laura would agree with me here that we have one of the most vigilant and careful and thorough regulators anywhere in the world. I have spent the last 6 months saying to the regulator, can we go? Can we go? Can we go? And I often heard, no, you can't. So we really have extremely careful regulation in this country. And until something's approved by our Health Canada regulators, we cannot use it in this country. And so I think that has to put a level of comfort under everybody in this room that what you're using is approved by Health Canada. And if they give new evidence or new data that suggests that there are problems, they will let us know in a nanosecond, as Sonia, Laura, and I know. So I think that's a very important part of this. And I see one question in the chat, Sonia, as well, which says, isn't proper, hand washing more important than antigen screening? And I've heard Laura say this so often. I can just answer. I can hear your voice, Laura, in my head. And you remember the slide Laura showed us all of the layers? What we're really doing here is building multiple layers of protection. Everybody on this call wishes we had one silver bullet to end this. If we had that bullet, we would be over the moon, frankly. But there isn't, and not even vaccines are the silver bullet. So what we're all about is embedding this additional layer among the other things that we can do. And we will eventually turn this disease from a pandemic into an endemic disease by doing all these things. So it ain't a choice. You don't choose one and forget about the others. It's not either or, it's and. And that's how we've approached this.
Laura, agreed?
Agreed. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. Okay, so talking about the layer of the screening system, I want to talk a little bit to the business leaders about how they set it up. So what was it like to set up your screening system, and what is it like to operate and maintain it? I'll first go to Brigitte, then I'll go to Emma, then Karina, then Anjie. Go ahead, Brigitte.
I think like a lot of things, this wasn't on our to-do list for 2020 or 2021, but we just worked the problem and, with an amazing team, just broke it down into what we needed to do. And, amidst a time when there was a lot of negative media, everything was dark, this was a way that we felt that we could help. And so the project team was happy to roll up their sleeves and figure it out. And then, of course, the collaboration with the companies that are here, but all of the companies at CDL, where we exchanged best practices, we exchanged, issues we were having, and we worked them together. Karina and I still talk regularly about little issues we're having, and having someone else who's living it, but with a different lens, really helps to look at it a different way and to learn and to develop different ways and different strategies to solve the same problem, but in a different setting. At the end of the day, I think all we wanted to do was keep everyone safe and try and help our employees feel like they were okay at work and that they weren't, bringing COVID home and putting their families at risk. And maintaining it has been such a journey and such an amazing, MBA on speed and learning, collaborating. And the best part I have to say for me is the buddying and being able to help other companies do it better and learn from the mistakes we made and then go beyond. We were one of the companies that supported DECIEM, and now they've surpassed us and they're at the top of the leaderboard. And every time I see them up there, I'm so proud because it's like my little chick has flown off and, is better, and learning from everyone has just been amazing. It's been quite an experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Brigitte. Emma from CVC, what was it like to set it up? What is it like to operate it?
If you'd have told me 18 months ago that I'd be helping run a rapid screening program, I don't think I would have believed you. But if I can do it, you can do it. It's doable. And a big part of the why it's doable, I think, are just the resource package that you're handed when you join the program. I think the playbook has just been permanently opened on my laptop for the last month and a half, and then knowing if I didn't find an answer there, I could turn to Slack, or I could turn to Sonia, or I could turn to Karina, or anyone else that's part of the group, and the support that we've been getting in terms of those foundations, the data system and how to build that, and the legal consent, things that we wouldn't have known where to start with had we not had that support, and the advice that we get from Dr. Rosella every week. All of that has just been sort of phenomenal, and would be nowhere close to where we are today without all of that. And the network. Karina is our buddy, and so shout out to Rogers, who's been absolutely phenomenal in terms of getting us to where we are, thanks to their support and generosity. We're not yet in maintenance, So I can't really speak to that, but I can see sort of the light ahead at the end of the tunnel with a lot of those building blocks in place. It is a lot of work, but it is manageable thanks to all of those resources. And I'd say our approach was just sort of embrace the crazy and accept the unknowns. And I think that's been part of our personal lives for the last 18 months or so. But in the context of the rapid screening program, we sort of did the same. We just jumped in and then grew it from there. And I would say for the most part, our staff have been really understanding and accepting that it's sometimes not perfect, and that they're seeing the program grow as we go. And for us, a big important part was, even as we sort of have this all in place and feels like things are settling, still needing to stay nimble, still needing to stay flexible so we can change to the guidance, and adjusting as we go.
Awesome, Emma. Well said. The year of uncertainty and long hair. Karina, how was it setting it up at Rogers and in maintenance mode now?
Just for the record, Rogers was the very first one to set up their screening booth. Air Canada was just behind us on the day one, but I will always tell Brigitte that we were first. My answer is going to be, it really actually depends. So it depends. You can make it really complicated and get custom booths and all sorts of things, or you keep it really simple. And the benefit from being, again, part of the consortium and the budding that we've done is I've worked with a small organization who literally set it up in a few days. They gave the test kits out, they did an online form, they did a virtual training, and they're done. And it was very, very simple. And then at Rogers, we had to set up one in our distribution warehouse for 50 employees. And it was a bit of an all hands on deck situation. And we did it in 24 hours. And it's cumbersome to maintain just because of the way we set it up, but it got done. So I think it really depends on many things. One, the type of setup that you're doing. You can make it as complicated or as simple as you like. It's up to you. And we always suggest, Brigitte says all the time, just keep it simple, start simple and make it clean. And then two, it depends on the team that you have. If you're just one person or a few, I think the key is, as both Emma and Brigitte says, you're just figuring things out. While there is a great playbook from the consortium, there's always seems new situations where there isn't a playbook, and then we build it and add to the playbook and other people can benefit, which is great. But oftentimes you are experiencing a situation which no one else has. So just think it through, figure it out. And then the last thing is just iterate. So it's never just once and done, oh, that screening site is set up and it's on their way. My team and I are always iterating about how we can be more efficient as we are planning to scale on. So our goal is to just continue making it as simple and streamlined as possible.
Okay, and Anjie, the chick that is now soaring like an eagle.
Yes, well.
Yeah, what was it like to set it up at DECIEM, and what is it like now? It was
crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. We just jumped right in. Thank God I had a great team that helped. And then, like I said, I think on one of our calls that we did, we did speed recruiting because we hired 4 on-site screening coordinators because our goal was to cover off all 3 shifts, 800 employees, so that we could do it twice a week. So that was really crazy because you think about the resources you need to do it and you're like, how are we going to do this? And somehow we managed to recruit and hire 4 fantastic individuals within 2 weeks and set it up and go live within 4 weeks. And that was, with the support of this team. Brigitte was great. We went and visited Air Canada, and that really helped us to see how it was going to work because it was very kind of gray and nebulous until we had that opportunity to see it in action. And then now, to be honest, it maintains itself. It was a lot of hoops to jump through to get it going very quickly. But once, we just learned as we went and dealt with the issues as they arose, and now it manages itself.
Awesome.
If I can
go ahead, Janice.
Just for 1 second. I mean, for all the people watching, you just saw this group in action, right? Just healthy, who's first? Brigitte's, I must have heard her say 100 times to newbies coming into this, don't overthink this, just go ahead and do it. But as soon as she finished saying it, she would add, but you can get in touch with me, or I can help you, or I can share this with you. And the experience that Anjie talked about and that Emma talked about, that's the lived experience of learning in real time and at speed, which is something we wish for this country, frankly. But you just saw it. in action. That was, I think, why you're seeing every day on the screen with smiles from ear to ear. This has been a joy.
Awesome. So just getting into the details here, Laura, there's a question about who actually administers the screens. Is it outsourced or conducted with internal resources? Can you just speak to the way that the regulations have evolved and where we are now?
Right. So this is something that, again, has been variable and has evolved over time. So initially, well, I won't talk about the swabs, but we went through a swab evolution. Maybe we can, that's for another story. After that, it was healthcare provider administered from the beginning. And that's a big challenge. It's significantly more costly to the organizations. It adds a lot of logistical challenges. Some people have medical teams in-house. Many companies do not. So how do those companies implement a screening program? So over time, the provinces actually have been, amazing to work with, and they've given feedback and been very thoughtful and said, okay, this is what we can do, this is what we can, and we report back. And so over time, non-healthcare provider administer was possible with some regulations. And then there's even some self-swabbing pilots happening as well. So it does not need to be a healthcare provider in every province. And for most provinces, it's a trained professional that can administer. Just keeping in mind, this is not a nasopharyngeal swab. This is not the swab that goes deep into your nose. This goes into your nose. So it's, I just want to make sure that's clear that, that's quite different than nasopharyngeal swabs that do have to be administered by healthcare professionals.
And I'll just mention, majority, I'd say, of the pilots right now are either self-administered, so somebody self-administering the swab and someone trained watching them, or at-home screening. So they're screening and they're reporting in the results through the app or through the data system that the organization is looking at. So that's the evolution there. It started really restricted. It's now much more, there's a broad set of ways that you can do it. And obviously it's an organizational decision. So I'm just going to go to Karina. I'm going to ask, what would be your piece of advice to businesses that are thinking about setting up a rapid screening system? What would you recommend?
So my common saying is just try it even once, because then you'll have that skill set under your belt. Because what we're finding is when we get the most requests, at least within Rogers, to conduct rapid testing, it's because there's an outbreak or there's a situation, and it's really difficult to think when you're in the fire, be like, how am I going to do that? So if you're even considering it, I would test it out with a small group of you, just so that you know what's involved, and then you have it ready on hand for if/when you may need it, sort of in your back pocket. That would be my number one recommendation. Just try it at least once.
Great. And I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to open this up to each of you. I'm just going to go to one by one about the back to work plan. Everyone is thinking about, will we end up in a hybrid setup? Will it be both? Just out of curiosity, to each of your businesses, how are you thinking about your return to work planning? And what role does rapid screening play in it? I'll go Anjie, then Emma, then Brigitte, then Karina. Go ahead, Anjie.
Well, we've been working throughout the pandemic in our manufacturing in our warehouses. So it was essential to keep them running and to minimize the outbreaks and to keep everything going. But we do also have retail in our head office. So we're in the process of launching at-home screening for those teams, just to make them feel safer, especially for the office teams, because they have not been at work for a year. So it brings them a certain level of comfort to become familiar, and we've already launched it for them now while they're still at home. So they're becoming comfortable with it so that when they come back to work, they'll be in a better place.
Awesome. Emma, return to work.
Similar. So we've managed to stay fully operational with a mix of on-site and working from home. Something we've never done before, but has worked for us. So we don't see there to be a real imperative for us to rush reintegration. We don't have the same drivers that the provinces have in terms of getting people back into our buildings. So sort of slow and steady is our motto. And we're not looking to pursue that really until the fall. I do think that what we're doing right now in terms of home screening is what will allow us to sort of establish those KPIs and determine whether rapid screening becomes a part of our reintegration, but no final decision made yet at this point.
Roger that. Brigitte for Air Canada.
Yeah, the short answer is it depends obviously on what's going to happen in the fall, but certainly as Karina was saying, we have all of our learnings on rapid screening. We have had success with it as a layer of protection, and should we have to dial it up, it's ready, it's available. And as Emma said, I think home screening is just a great way to be able to scale. It's a lot easier for employees to do it. And it also keeps COVID positive employees out of the workplace.
And Karina?
This summer, we're actually piloting at-home screening for all those who are entering into we're piloting a hybrid return to office model, and all those participants will be participating in rapid screening. And based on those pilots, we will then make the decision if we are going to scale up for everyone who's planning to return in a hybrid fashion in the fall.
Awesome. Okay, Laura, before we go to next steps, Dr. Rosella, do you have final words on either the return to work planning and or just advice to any business? We have roughly around 200 people on the call right now. Any words of advice to the community who are considering rapid screening as part of their back to work plan or operations?
I think the main point is to think about how you can enhance and get ahead of things. So I think we heard a lot about responding, and I think we know how that works. Longer lockdowns, staying close, once you respond, once things are already at a point. So thinking about getting proactive, thinking about using all the tools at your disposal, and trying to get ahead and preventing things before they get out of control. And we have lots of tools, actually. We're not using them all. The companies you're hearing today are using them all. And I think there is a way, if you think about it too hard, you'll think of 18 reasons not to do it. And like Brigitte tells us, which is actually the advice that you get from people that have managed emergency situations, you have to act. And if you delay acting, you're always behind. So I think that's what I would say. Just thinking about comprehensive set of safety measures, getting advice on how you can do it safely, and to go for it.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly here. So you may be asking yourself the question about how would you get involved? Again, registration is open for our cohort 15. We kick off next Wednesday, June 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you want to join that cohort, the program is free of charge, sector agnostic. You'll get onboarding support, the Slack channel, our ops meetings, an industry partner, a buddy. One of these buddies might be yours. The playbook and resources, virtual help desk, and the comms tools, as well as the data system. So connecting into the apps and the data reporting system. So you're doing that through a centralized system. Lastly, a reminder that the rapid antigen screens are currently provided free of charge through Health Canada or other provincial agencies. So that is the call to action. That's the link to register. Daniel will also place it on the Slido, so you can click through the Slido. And yeah, I'll just finish by saying this is what it would look like. You'd have about a 3-week ramp up process. Get your orientation week during the kickoff, your ops meetings, your industry partner will instruct you and support you on ordering your screens, and then support as you ramp up your operations. Okay, great. So we have about 8 minutes left. If there's any more questions, to please place on Slido. Should I set up the rapid screening system? Should I get bangs? I know everyone's thought it at least once in the last 15 months. It just crosses your mind when you're alone at home enough. Janice, any comments about the data system specifically, that efficient reporting system that's across the country? And
first of all, I've already got bangs, so I'm not getting bangs. And secondly, just a kudo to Laura. She is known across this country now as Dr. Laura. And a lot of times when she's not in the room, I hear people saying, well, as Dr. Laura said. So Laura has a new life. It almost sounds like we're waiting for a kind of podcast or
someone give her a show. Someone give her a show.
That's right. I mean, you're a new candidate for this, Laura. Looking ahead, the data has been a critically important part of this, to be serious. We have built something that unfortunately still doesn't exist in this country. We build a platform where the provinces across this country can upload data in ways that are comparable and where the data talks to each other. This is an enduring frustration in this country. We've tried before. It's not that we haven't tried. But it's usually been tried by governments, and this came from a not-for-profit that worked to do this. If I look ahead at the future, regardless of what happens to this pandemic, we know we're going to need this kind of platform to move our country ahead. And the capacity to learn from the data system that's been built here is just absolutely essential from this country. The fact that Brigitte knows what's happening in her company, or Anjie or Emma, you know it in real time. Each province knows what's happening in real time on a week-by-week basis. And each province knows how they compare to other provinces, which they don't know without this kind of data system. And the federal government can take a look across the 8 participating provinces. You know, when I look at this, I'm the one who's busy with the lessons learned here for this country. This is just a must-do for all of us to do better. And let's tell the story as it is here. This is led by Canadian companies who've stepped up and who've done this. So that's why I think it's such a remarkable, remarkable story of collaboration, of innovation, fearless. You know, it's just do it. Just do it. That's what we've done over and over again in very, very challenging times. And, you know, it's Brigitte and Karina and Emma and Anjie who should get the credit.
Lovely. Well said, Janice. So we have just 2 minutes left. In that time, we had a few more questions come through. Very simple one. Is home screening using the self-test at home? Yes, indeed it is. Yes, indeed. 2 is implementation sounds like it's executed with essential workers here. When do you recommend looking at preparing this for our workplaces if they're non-essential? So this can be used in any workplace. And in majority of the provinces right now, you do not require a healthcare professional to administer it. You require a trained person. So you can have a screening coordinator, you reappropriate some of your existing staff. There's also the opportunity for some at-home screening pilots, which are unsupervised if the people go through the training. Laura, I think I'll say last words to you, and then we'll wrap. You are as you know, I'll call you Dr. Laura, but as you know, as far as public health in action, right, from like theory to implementation. Before we sign off, any last notes for the community and the organizations here?
Yeah, I feel like I should be getting the least amount of credit. The credit needs to go to the people implementing. I think that's been the challenge. We know this technology exists. We know that it could have been implemented badly and caused harm. That was some of the initial pushback. These companies have shown they work together, put everything aside. I mean, what I've seen, the amount of collaboration, including companies that literally compete with each other, I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. And the rapid learning and scaling is something that I hope we can take to the health system as well. So it's been inspiring, actually.
Awesome. Okay. And with that, we will sign off. A huge, huge thank you to Brigitte from Air Canada, Karina from Rogers, Emma from CBC, Anjie from DECIEM, Professor Janice Stein, and Professor Rosella. Thank you so, so much. And we'll see you guys next time.